All right, today we're diving into one of the most transformative, just explosive periods in American history, the Second Great Awakening. And let me tell you, this wasn't just some religious revival. It was a firestorm of faith that completely rewired the nation's social and cultural DNA. So let's kick things off with a huge question, one that really frames everything we're about to talk about. How do these massive societal shifts, in technology, economics, politics, how do they actually get in there and reshape our deepest, most personal spiritual beliefs? It's not just some dusty old history question. It's the key to understanding this incredible religious explosion. You see, the Second Great Awakening didn't just pop up out of thin air, not at all. It was born from a perfect storm of powerful forces, all converging at once in early America, creating this environment that was just perfectly ripe for a revolution in faith. First, you have this incredible surge of democratic spirit. The American Revolution was still fresh in everyone's minds, and people felt this deep, powerful hunger for a voice. They were just plain tired of being told what to think by an elite, whether that was in the government or from the church pulpit. And this desire for personal agency, it didn't stop at the ballot box. It spilled right over into their spiritual lives. The thinking was, hey, if you can choose your leaders, why on earth can't you choose your own salvation? Okay, at the exact same time, you've got the market revolution championing this idea of the self-made person, this belief that you, through your own hard work, could control your economic destiny. What's so fascinating here is how that idea found a perfect echo in a new religious message, that your salvation was also in your hands. It was a result of your choices, not something predetermined by some distant, unknowable God. And then there's the cultural vibe. America was starting to move away from the cold, hard logic of the Enlightenment. People started to value personal feeling, intuition, real emotional experience. They wanted a faith they could feel, a faith that resonated in their hearts, not one they just had to understand with their minds. This romantic impulse completely changed what people wanted and even demanded from religion. And this slide just lays it out so clearly. The First Great Awakening from earlier, that was way more intellectual, very focused on the Calvinist idea of predestination, and it was mostly led by an educated elite. But the second? Whoa. It was all about free will, raw emotion, and this radically egalitarian, come-as-you-are spirit. It was a complete 180, a total theological and cultural flip. So with all these powerful forces swirling around, a whole new kind of faith starts to emerge, carrying a message that was absolutely perfectly tailored for this young, energetic, and rapidly expanding nation. So what was it exactly? Well, at its core, the Second Great Awakening was this massive wave of Protestant revivals that just swept across the U.S. from around the 1790s to the 1840s. And its message was simple, but totally revolutionary. You, yes you, could achieve personal salvation through your own moral choices. And what's more, that personal faith demanded that you get out there and work to make society better too. And the way this message spread was just as game-changing. Forget about quiet, formal church services. The signature event of this whole movement was the camp meeting. I want you to just try and imagine it. Thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, up to 25,000 people gathered together in a field for days of passionate, emotional, hard-on-your-sleeve preaching. It literally took religion out of the old buildings and brought it directly to the people, especially on the frontier. The message itself was just radically empowering. It told everyday people that their eternal salvation was a personal choice they could make. It welcomed everyone, men, women, black, white, enslaved, and free, into these intense spiritual experiences, often treating them as equals in a way that was almost unheard of in the rest of society. And maybe most importantly, it forged this unbreakable link between your personal faith and the cause of social justice. Now, a movement this huge needs leaders, right? And this era produced some absolute giants who perfected these new methods of preaching and gave a powerful voice to people who had been silenced for far too long. So, let's meet one of the rock stars of the movement, Charles Grandison Finney. This guy was an absolute master of the new, highly emotional style of preaching. He knew exactly how to create a totally electric atmosphere in a room. Finney's innovations were, frankly, game changers. He used plain, everyday language and these dramatic pauses. He'd even call out individuals in the crowd to make a decision for Christ right then and there. Plus, he preached this idea of perfectionism, this radical notion that humans could and should strive for a sinless life right here on Earth. That idea dramatically raised the stakes for moral action. And then you've got guys like Peter Cartwright. He was the classic frontier preacher, a true embodiment of the movement's rugged spirit. He was a Methodist circuit rider, which meant he took that revivalist fire out west, traveling huge distances on horseback. Cartwright was known for these raw, fiery, passionate sermons that really connected with the settlers. He wasn't some stuffy, refined theologian. He was tough, he was energetic, and he famously wasn't afraid to physically take on hecklers. He truly was the raw, energetic spirit of frontier religion. And what's so critical to understand is how this movement opened doors for incredible new voices. You had Harry Hosier, an African-American preacher who was so eloquent that he drew both black and white crowds. Jarena Lee, who shattered gender barriers to become the first authorized female preacher in the AME Church, a true pioneer. And of course, Richard Allen, who founded the AME Church itself, creating this vital institution for religious freedom that became a powerhouse for the abolitionist movement. All of this spiritual intensity had to be concentrated somewhere, and no place on earth was more intense than this one small region in upstate New York that became a true crucible, a real laboratory for religious innovation. They called it the Burned Over District. And why that name? Because it was swept by so many waves of revivalist fire, one after another, that people joked there was no fuel, no unconverted people left to burn. This religious hothouse created the absolute perfect conditions for radical new interpretations of faith to just sprout up. And just look at the sheer variety of new faiths that came out of this one small area. This is where Mormonism was born, when Joseph Smith said that divine revelations led him to the Book of Mormon. Millerism also started here, with William Miller predicting the exact date of Christ's return. Now, when that didn't happen, what was called the Great Disappointment eventually led his followers to form what we now know as the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So it's clear the Second Great Awakening wasn't just a flash in the pan. Not even close. It fundamentally altered America's religious landscape and left this lasting legacy that completely reshaped the nation's social conscience. And here's the single biggest takeaway. The moral energy that was unleashed by the Awakening became the fuel for the great social reform movements of the 19th century. That core belief, that you could perfect yourself in society, led directly to the abolitionist fight to end slavery, the push for temperance, and the very early struggles for women's rights. Personal salvation and social justice became two sides of the same coin. Which, brings us right back to where we started. The Second Great Awakening is this powerful reminder that when society goes through huge shifts, it often triggers really deep changes in how we, as people, look for meaning. So I'll leave you with this to think about. How might the massive changes we're living through today in technology, social media, global connection, how might all that be quietly shaping the next great shift in how we find purpose and build community?